Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are, no matter what time of day you're watching this, we're glad you have decided to join us for this amazing session entitled 10 Things Your 911 Callers Wish You Understood, presented by the very personable and giggly Samantha Hoskins. Hoskins. Why did I just put it? Wow. Anyway, it's going to be a great day. We're already here. If this is your first time joining us, this training session is provided for free through the Missouri Professional Training Partnership. You can learn more about our training partnership at moapco.org/training. Um, we do certify this training for continuing education in Missouri. It will be 1 hour of interpersonal perspective training. For anybody outside the state, you'll be able to get a certificate using a training link that'll show up below. Right now it says visit training partnership or partnership training portal. About halfway through the session, that'll change over to sign in and get credit for this. So you can sign in, get credit for it. We don't certify or don't guarantee that any other state besides Missouri is going to accept this training because there are several states out there who they've got very particular rules on their continuing education. But no matter the case, this training is going to be great. It's going to be worth the watch. And we're glad that you joined us today. Just a few couple of housekeeping rules. You do need to sign in to get credit for this training. You only need to sign in once. Give me about 72 hours to get those certificates out to you after you do sign in, because I'm checking through a lot of different boxes to make sure that all of our past training that is still up here gets sent out at the same time. We do have another upcoming session on December the 19th as of now, unless I have to change that because I may be going in for an interview for something. But December 19th at 10 a.m. Central Time, Matt Harwell out of Colorado is going to be joining us doing a session on living well or finishing well, leaving a legacy. So join us 10 a.m. on December 19th for that. And then lastly, we do still have some really cool merch items available on our Missouri APCO store. You can get that on the moapco.org website. But we've got a Missouri APCO challenge coin. We've got a couple of 2022 National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week shirts. Those are at cost right now, so they're pretty cheap. We've got a lot of mediums, a couple of larges, and a couple of smalls. So yeah, and then we've got these really cool. There it goes, it focuses. The Missouri Professional Training Partnership Challenge coin, developing today's heroes and preparing tomorrow's leaders. That's kind of our tagline this year. And on the back side, looks pretty cool. It's got the founding members of the partnership. And we've got this cool little woven patch for the training partnership. It is on PVC backing, so it does work pretty well. 4 inches wide by, I think, 2.5 tall. And you can kind of see how it compares to other patches up there in the corner. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking because you're not here for me. You're here for this amazing person. Take it away, Sam.
Thank you, Zach. Hey, I appreciate the invite. And Missouri APCO, I am so glad to be able to present this to you. This is kind of like a signature presentation of mine. So it's kind of full circle for me. I first presented 10 Things Your 911 Caller Wishes You Understood back at Dare to Be Great 3 for that virtual conference. That was back in 2020. So really being able to present this to y'all, this is like one of my last presentations of the year. And this is kind of like a last hurrah almost, probably for a while for this presentation. So to be able to bring it to y'all, an amazing chapter doing amazing things. I love y'all. Also, I did get one of your Mo Apco challenge coins. Y'all, it's pretty amazing. I just wanted to say that. So let's go ahead and let's dig in with this. So my name is Samantha Hawkins, and I am presenting 10 things your 911 caller wishes you understood. Now, I hail all the way from Marietta, Georgia. Back up. Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County Department of Emergency Communications, over 7 years. And that ECO2, I started off call taking, dispatching, member of peer support, CTO, now training technician with our training division and ETC instructor. So got a lot of passion. I hope through this all y'all will hear it. And obviously, if you've been doing this job as long as I have, or way longer than I have, then take this as a refresher, right? We can always use a little rejuvenation, a little fire to get us going again. And if you're brand new to the world of 911, welcome. It's a crazy, crazy world, and you're probably a little crazy yourself, is how you ended up here. And we're glad to have you. Take this session, this presentation, as you will, and learn from it, and hope it becomes part of your, your resources and everything. So that's me in a nutshell. Now, this session is all about putting the compassion back into what we do in communications, emergency communications, because everything begins and ends with us, the person in the seat, the person beneath the headset. And I'll tell you, a lot of what we do is listen all the time, right? That is the bulk of what we do. You could say, I don't know, maybe it's 80% customer service, not 20%. No, it's less than that. It's probably maybe a 60-40 thing. It's customer service and it's listening. But here's a quote that I really like by Charles Dickens. He says, "The worst of all listeners is the man who does nothing but listen." Yes, listening is a big part of what we do in this profession, but it's not all that we do. We literally don't sit there and hear a call come in and we're just hearing it. We're actively listening. And this is a big part of what we're going to delve into in this session. How to be better listeners, how to be better active listeners for our callers. So, active listening, compassionate listening, right? It's not just sitting there, just people talking on the phone, and we're not reflecting back, we're not giving feedback, right? We do all of that. We give feedback, we acknowledge, I hear you, you're heard, I hear what you're saying, I hear what's an emergency to you. We're listening to what's being verbally said and what's not being verbally said, right? Tone of voice, inflection, things like that. The emotional cues, right? We ask someone, hey, does anyone there have a weapon? And they say no. And then we clearly hear someone else in the background saying something about, I put that rifle down or something, right? Active listening. This is what we do all the time. So this session was born from that. It was born of, hey, we do this job just effortlessly, right? And it almost becomes second nature to us. But when I created this session, the idea was back then during the pandemic, it almost felt like coming out of 2020, we all had lost our manners in a way. And I know we're still kind of in recovery from that. We're essential workers. Through the pandemic, we were still kicking butt and doing what we do and showing up. And I can tell you, I'm a member of the core team at my center, which is our community outreach team, community outreach, recruitment, and education. And we give sessions all the time to our citizens, elderly, young, high schoolers, college students, all the time. And we say, hey, when you call 911, this is what you need to have in your mind. This is what you need to bear in mind to help them be more understanding of us and what we do. And we usually will say something along the lines of, hey, when you dial 911, this is what you need to understand. We ask a lot of questions. This is why we ask all the questions, things like that. So this session is about, hey, when we get the call, we on this side of the radio, on this side of the headset, when someone calls into us, what do we need to bear in mind to be more understanding of our 911 caller? And this is not all encompassing, but this is about 10 things that we can all, as emergency telecommunicators, from all backgrounds, no matter how long our years range, from 0 to 20, here's about 10 things that we can all keep in mind to be more understanding and to be more compassionate listeners and telecommunicators for the citizens that we serve. So number one, this might be my first time calling 911 for help. So please be patient with me. This one is probably, there's a reason why it's number one. It's the first one. It's because it's literally the basis of all the other ones. All 10 of these lessons I'm going to talk about. So I'm guilty of this as well. How many times have you or you've heard, a coworker of yours get off the phone with someone and afterwards they're like, that was a terrible 911 call. Okay. So the thing about that is, ironically, when you say someone's terrible at something, like, oh, that was a terrible 911 caller, you're basically implying like you should know better. Like, hey, that's not what you do when you call 911. But if it's their first time, did they know what they should do when they dial 911? And like I said, I'm guilty of it as well. So one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that patience and kindness truly goes a long, long way in this profession. You cannot be in this line of work very long if you're not patient and you're not kind. Imagine that caller dials 911 is probably the first time they've ever dialed 911. Let me ask y'all a question. How many times have y'all dialed 911? Personally, I have dialed 911 once, well, actually twice. And one time I just texted someone that I was working and I was like, hey, can you put this call in? All of those times came after I started working for 911. So I had a bit of an advantage knowing the questions they were going to ask, how many questions they were going to ask. I knew the protocol because I knew we used protocol. So I knew what they were going to ask. But if you've never dialed 911 before, you probably may be a terrible 911 caller because if you don't know, you don't know. So what's our job? Easy. We do it all the time. We don't think about it, right? But our caller calls in, we educate them sometimes. We help them. They're spitting out information, right? You ask them, tell me exactly what happened. Well, back in 1992, okay, doesn't help me, right? So what do? They don't know what to expect, especially if they've never dialed 911 before. We guide them. We guide them to get the answers that we need. They start talking about something that happened in 1992, 1991, and you know it's not relevant to now. What do we say? We say things like, okay, but what's happening now? Tell me what's happening right now. We help clarify what's going on. We steer them away from information we don't need so we can get the information that we do need. That's our job. And guess what? We do it so well because we're trained to do it. So bear in mind that caller that might be calling in might have never ever dialed 911 before. So maybe they just need a little extra patience, a little extra kindness to help them to know what to do. Number two, when I dial 911, I'm expecting that I will reach competent, trustworthy, and knowledgeable call taker. So we've all dealt with the expectations of our callers, right? And some of them are quite lofty, right? It's based off of television shows and movies and books. And they think that we can pinpoint their exact location to a T, right? Because they did it in CSI. Obviously, we can't meet all of those expectations. But some of those expectations we can meet. Now, I've had the callers who will say things like, oh, at the end of the call, thank you so much, officer. Or this is a great one. It's on a medical call. I stayed landline with them and they'll go, oh, I see you pulling up. Or let's say if it was, they were reporting a car accident and they're like, is that you? You see me waving? No, I don't see you waving. That's not me pulling up. I'm not the officer, right? They don't know, right? They've got this expectation that we're doing it all. That's you who You took the call and you gave me these great instructions, scene safety instructions. You got all the information. You're finding out exactly where I'm at, and that's you now pulling up. Nope, it's not. But like I said, we can't meet all those expectations. But at the same time, we bear in mind that the expectations that our callers have of us and the services we provide paints a whole picture of public safety to them. So yes, some of our callers think they're speaking to actual police officers. We're not actual police officers, but I tell you what we are. We are the first responders. So while we may temper some of those expectations, I don't mind my 911 caller thinking, whatever, you're the greatest or whatever, because we kind of are. We kind of are. We do have a duty to them. We have a duty to provide pre-arrival care, life-saving instructions, and we do that all the time. Public trust is very important in our job. I think most agencies, we all sign something along the lines of public trust. We don't have a security clearance, but we sign something acknowledging that yes, with this uniform we wear, with the badge we wear, with the title that we hold as emergency telecommunicators, as 911 dispatchers, call takers, what have you, public trust comes with that. We didn't have to go to someone, and we don't have, our 911 callers, when they call in, the very first thing we say is, wait, hold on a minute, I need to know, do you trust me? We don't do that, right? Because it comes with the job. So it's important to know that your 911 caller does have expectations that the information you're giving them is trustworthy, and it's the best. They expect us to be reliable, to be timely. And yes, we can't always factor into that. But in the ways that we can impact it, we owe a duty to them to be timely, to be efficient, to make sure the right help gets out to them in the right time. And they expect us to know what we're doing. You can hear in someone's voice if they don't know what they're doing. Trust me, they can hear in our voice when it's incompetence. It's, I don't know. Does that mean we always know? No, we don't always know. But we by golly better know who to turn to or where to turn to find out what they need to know. So this is something to bear in mind, not something to frustrate us, and like, that's one more thing on our plate. But bear in mind that yes, some of our callers expect the world from us, and we can't give them the world. But we can do our part to make sure that we are ensuring that public trust in public safety as a whole for our community, the county or the city, the state that we serve, that we're doing our part to make sure it's valued and it's treasured. Because as we know in our line of work, you lose trust, man, you lose everything. Number 3, I'm not the professional here. So don't be surprised if I don't behave like one. It's a little bit of a callback to our first slide. Don't expect you from your callers. They're not us. Let me tell you about us. We're trained to do what we do. We are equipped to do what we do. We get the skill set, we get the knowledge, we get the resources, we get the certifications. We get all these tools around us to do what we do. They didn't go to a 911 school on how to be a great 911 caller. But we all, in some capacity, went through an academy or went through some kind of training program to become the skilled emergency telecommunicators that we are today. We're the professionals, not them, and our callers. What does that mean? That means, just like in that little graphic there, that's us. We're this solid, got it all together, or at least we look and sound like we got it all together. We're this ball. We're just the calm in the chaos. And that's your 911 caller. And that's not every 911 caller. We know the statistics. Not everyone's hysterical. Not everyone's all over the place. But a lot of them are. Some of them are. We are expected to be the calm in the chaos. We are expected to be the calm to their crazy. So they're all over the place and they're yelling and they're going just a mile a minute. What do? We don't match that energy. That's what we don't do. We bring the calm. We try to be the calm in the middle of the storm. We don't go, it's terrible. Can't you pull yourself together? No. They're behaving perfectly normal for them because guess what? They don't have the skill sets that we do. I love hyping us 911 professionals. I will do it all the time. And part of why I can do that, because yes, you've got the skill set that goes with it. So understand that your 911 caller isn't trained to remain as composed in stressful emergency situations like you are. So when you get them and they're hysterical and they're all over the place and they're losing their mind, that's when you say, all right, I'm a step up in my training. I can't match their energy, obviously. I've got to be, if you want to think of it, the bigger person in the situation, fine. Think of it that way. But realize that we can't expect us from our callers. So let's not do that. What happens when we expect us from our callers is, yeah, we get frustrated. We get disillusioned real quick. We'll get upset, and then maybe we do start to match their energy. But when you bear in mind, that's why they're calling in. Because guess what? Remember the expectations? They're calling in because they realize they're in a situation and they don't know what to do. So they dialed the first number, came to their mind to get someone who they believe does have the skill set and the composure and the calm and the compassion to do what they need to do or to tell them what needs to be done. That's us, not our 911 caller. Number 4, if I sound frustrated, please don't take it personally. I'm probably more frustrated at myself than anyone else. Oh man, this is a big one. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I tell you what, I have been called all sorts of names. I've had people tell me things. I've had 911 callers go as far as to tell me that I'm a terrible mom and everything. I don't even have kids. I'm like, what are you talking about, right? In my mind, people will say all sorts of things when they're in distress, when they're panicked. You know, want to make sure I'm quoting right. Yeah, it's actually Karima Holmes that said something, and I've seen this quote go around, and I know that she's the one behind it. She says something along the lines of it's hard to get good intel from people in distress, and it really is. And I tell you what, part of our job in being in this profession is realizing you cannot take anything personally that your caller is saying or doing in that situation. So here's a nice little graphic of your really, really heightened emotional caller, hysterical. You can have Emmy Award winning hysterics going on, Pulitzer Prize winning dramatics. And sometimes it's just full on frustration of the world. They hate you, they hate their job, they hate their dog, they hate your dog, they hate your mom, they hate their mom. They just hate everybody, right? Don't confuse your caller's helplessness as anger or frustration directed at you. They don't hate you. They don't even know who you are, right? They're saying all sorts of things. Don't take that to heart and go, "Oh, I'm terrible at what I do." They said, "I don't know my job." Don't they know? I've got an ENP after my name. They don't know you. Don't take it personally. You know, I had a caller I've had many callers, like I said, who's called me out of my name, whatever. But every so often, I'll get a caller who will just be like on a rampage. I remember one time I came in working OT, and I'm feeling good. I'm like, I'm gonna come in, get some hours in. I'm working OT. I'm helping them. I'm helping myself too. And my first call of the day, I get somebody, and they're just laid into me like I have been calling and whatever, and nobody helped me. And it was one of those where they'd already talked to like three other folks. I was the fourth person, wasn't clear on the situation at all. So I get them, and I'm just like, whoa, like, ma'am, I need you to back up. I don't understand what's going on. And it was like she wasn't having it. She's like, get me your supervisor, right? And of course, supervisor had to be, they got to be formal about it and everything. We'll investigate and they listen in. And I'm sitting back like, this is my first call of the day. Like, that's it. Can I clock out now? We can't do that, right? And I knew in the back of my mind, I didn't do anything wrong. I knew she was just already livid, set off. And you get callers like that. They reached out to her, and by the time they had reached out to her and they're like, hey, ma'am, we wanted to follow up with you. And, we know that you wanted to like launch this whole investigation into everyone you talked to. And by that time, the caller's like, oh, nah, it wasn't them. It was me. Yeah, I just not, it just wasn't my day. I'm sorry about that. Now, can you imagine? Because the follow up that was days later. Can you imagine when you get a call like that, right? Your first call of the day, you take something like that to heart. Your caller's like, you don't know your job. Put a supervisor on the phone. Whatever. You're not helping me. If you let something like that just weigh on you and wear you down, man. If I had held on to that for the whole day, I would have been miserable. And then I would have been waiting and waiting day to day just till finally days later, and they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, Sam. She was like, yeah, she was just having a bad day. That's why you've got to let stuff go. Don't take any of it to heart. Your caller will say all sorts of things. They don't really hate your guts. They don't really think you're a terrible mom. They don't even know if you have kids. They don't really know if you're a terrible dad or not just because they said it. Don't hold on to that. When people are angry and they're helpless and it's the worst moment of their life, they're dealing with all sorts of emotions. Put yourself in your caller's shoes. Think of the worst thing that could happen, that you could be seeing happen, whether it's to a loved one of yours or it's happening to you. One of the worst things, and you think about the roller coaster of emotions that you'd probably be on. So be understanding of your callers and learn to let that stuff go. Number 5, I know you're only trying to help, but you're not here. You don't see what I'm seeing. So it's a fact. Caller calls in and they're like, hey, there's blood everywhere. I'm just bleeding and it's just an open gas and everything. And you feel your heart just beating. You're like, oh no. And you're like, ma'am, I need you to listen to me. I'm going to give you instructions on how to control the bleeding. And you go through all of that. Get a clean, dry cloth, and you give them all the instructions. And then fire and EMS gets on scene, or your officer gets on scene, and they're like, radio, we put a Band-Aid on it, and it's all good. You're like, what happened to the blood everywhere, right? You have this whole picture in your head. And it's bad enough, right? In 911, in our profession, closure is a big thing, right? We don't always get closure. So what do, right? We fill it, all those gaps of what could have been, what happened, whatever, we fill it with the worst. But you add to that your caller does something like that. They're talking open wound and a gas and blood everywhere, and then fire EMS, they get on scene. They get to actually see it, and they're like, no, radio. So what does that mean? Does that mean we doubt every single caller? We immediately roll our eyes and like, I'm sure it's not blood everywhere. No, we don't do that, right? Because we take our callers at their word. We take them at face value. But here's what we do understand. Sometimes our callers don't see the situation up front exactly as it is. They see the worst, right? Because they're in the thick of it, they're in the middle of it. So sometimes, yes, the actual minor laceration looks like an open gaping wound with severe just blood just lost just everywhere. Same thing, they call in every 4th of July saying, yep, there's an AK-47 going off outside my home, and it's fireworks, right? We don't argue back and forth with them. Sir, ma'am, I guarantee it's not an AK-47 here. No, we don't do that, right? What do we do? Put it in. AK-47 per the caller, this address, they hear a machine gun. Things usually appear worse than what they are when you're actually inside, the situation. Inside looking out, it looks like end of the world. It's very easy for us on the whole other side of it to hear our caller and we can kind of make sense and be like, yeah, I don't think that's happening. I think it's really that happening. I think you're just thinking and seeing in extremes. But that's part of why we don't expect us from our callers. Don't argue with your caller about what they're seeing. Help them to distinguish between what's fact and what's fiction. We can only deal with facts, right? So sometimes you'll get a caller and they'll give the facts. Well, this is happening. I see this, and this. Next thing you know, they're going down the track of, and maybe that's happening. And we're like, well, wait a minute, bring your caller back. And that is our job. We help to bring them back to the facts of what's going on. But don't argue with your caller because, truth be told, we're not there. And what it looks like to them, no matter what we say, it may just look like that to them. I'm not going to go back and forth and say, are you sure it's a gaping wound and there's blood everywhere? I'm going to take them at face value. Take your callers at face value. I know we deal with frequent flyers. Y'all might, at your agencies, everybody has a name for it. You might call them differently. We call them frequent flyers. Some of our callers that call in every day about the same thing. Sometimes they don't want to meet with officers. They just want to, hey, this is going on, and we know good and well there's not a spaceship hovering. It's not this. There's not a turtle outside their door. You're just calling about something. I'm not going to argue back and forth with that caller and say, you're not seeing this. Why? I'm not going to do that. Sometimes they really just, that's not my job to do. That's not our job to do. Sometimes at the end of the day, you're going to just listen to them. You're going to hear them out. Say, okay, I hear you, whatever. I'll make sure we let someone know. Or get an officer, whatever. The zone patrol will take care of that. Help your callers to see fact from fiction. Help them to dispel the myths of what's not happening when you've got the facts. But don't argue with them when honestly, we're not there in that situation because, yes, sometimes it's very easy to see things in extremes when you are in the middle of it. Number 6, I didn't dial 911 to be judged or dismissed. If I'm asking for help, please listen to what I have to say. Talked about active listening and what that is. How it's not just listening, not just, oh yeah, I hear you. And I tell you what, it's also not. It's not hearing with prejudgments going on in my head or bias going on in our head while our caller's talking to us. And we're just like, well, I can see you're calling from that mobile home park. Oh, you're calling about gunshots. Well, it's always gunshots in that mobile home park, right? Everyone just wants to be heard. Everyone just wants to feel like what they're calling about matters to us just as much as it matters to them. Every caller wants to feel like their call matters. That's why they're calling us. And yes, is every 911 call a legitimate emergency? No, but it's an emergency to them. Even if they are calling about, they specifically said no mustard on their burger, and the restaurant put mustard on their burger, and they're calling about it. Yeah, is it really, was that worth 911? Maybe not, but it's an emergency to them. And at the end of the day, if what they just want to hear is, all right, ma'am, we'll send an officer out to talk to you, whatever, I'll have an officer to call you. Understand that that is what listening, active, compassionate listening is all about. It's not hearing where that person's calling from. Oh, they're calling from that mobile home park. There's gunshots every night at that mobile home park. So what they're calling about. It's not hearing their zip code. It's not hearing their background. It's not hearing that so-and-so, oh, they sound like they didn't have a degree. Guess what? You don't need a degree to call 911 to ask for help. And our callers should never, none of our callers should ever get that impression that we're judging them. Or we're not taking what they're saying at face value because, I don't know if, I don't really, I don't think they're credible. They don't sound credible. We're not judge and jury. We're not the one deciding, who's right, who's wrong. We're there to listen and to make sure they get the help they need. Everyone just wants to know that they're being heard, whatever it is, that they're not just another call stat. Yay, got my call stats for the day. Not just another sob story, not just fodder for us to get off the phone and laugh about. I'm not saying we don't have some dark humor in 911 because I know we do. But as long as for the duration of that call, while we're on that call, be active in listening. Hear your caller, not where they're coming from, not their walk of life, not their background, not whether or not they have a degree or know perfect English. Hear your caller. Might not be an actual real emergency, but it's one to them. And that matters to them enough to dial 911. So it should matter enough to us, the people who make up 911. Because again, one of their expectations, right? I'm calling in to get someone who's trustworthy, who can help me, who can tell me what to do, not someone on the other end of this phone who's just going to sit back and judge me. They don't want to be judged. They don't need to be judged, your 911 caller. They need to be heard, and they need to be helped. And that is what we're trained to do. And no matter what agency you come from, whatever state, whatever city, I guarantee you, whatever your job description might say, it might look a little different than what my job description, how we write it here in Cobb. But I guarantee you, however it was written, however it's intended, at the end of the day, it was meant that you listen to your caller, you hear what they need, you get them the help that they need, or refer them to where they can get the help that they need, that they feel that that 911 call, their 911 call, truly mattered to you. Number 7, if I tell you I have reservations about police, be empathetic. I might have my reasons. I told y'all that this session, it was born in 2020 after the pandemic. And that was a time, obviously, not only was we dealing with, a whole pandemic and everything, but we was dealing with a pretty racially tense climate. Well, here's the news. That was 2020, this is 2022. And a lot of the same issues that we're dealing with, as far as race goes, still happening in 2020. Just like it was happening in 2019, 2018, 2017. So here's actually four important truths to keep in mind. Number one, racial bias is still alive and well in 2022. And yes, it largely impacts public safety, at least the perspective and the perception that people have as public safety. And here's the thing, even when it comes to the criminal justice system, a lot of times people lump that all in, right? So they'll be talking about, you'll have someone has had some experience, or they know someone in their family or know a friend who's had some experience. And it might really just deal with the criminal justice system, but it always gets lumped in, everything, law enforcement, criminal justice, and you know how 911, we just get lumped right into that mix. Truth number two, many Black and brown citizens are reluctant to call 911 because a lot of them still believe that, hey, it's going to escalate the situation. It's going to get worse if I bring an officer into it. Knowing that, understand, that means that some of your citizens really debated for a long time before they dialed 911. I've had callers, I've had domestic situations, and I'll get a female caller who will call in and say about her son. I had one, and called in about her older teenage son and described the whole situation, this whole domestic going on, and I'm hearing her, and I'm like, hey, ma'am, I need help out there, whatever, and ask all the questions I need to ask about weapons, about whatever. Are you safe? And then at the end of it, she goes, but look, tell the officer, hey, I don't want you to shoot him, or I don't want to, whatever. I don't want you to hurt him, or whatever. And I hear it, and that public safety part of me goes in my mind like, okay, well, you called 911. Obviously, you know that we're here to help, right? And now you're telling me, you're laying down all this. Don't do this. Don't shoot him. Please don't kill him, right? But the other part of me breaks a little. And I feel for her because I realize that, truth be told, she might be one of those callers that took forever to even decide to dial 911 because she kept thinking, well, maybe I can work this out myself. Maybe I can figure this out before I get an officer involved. And it got bad enough that now she had to. So bear this in mind, be empathetic, and bear in mind with your callers that sometimes that is what they're thinking, that if I bring an officer involved, it's going to get worse. Truth number three is that your callers might have had a bad history with police or with the criminal justice system, or they might have a relative or a friend who's had a bad situation before with an officer, or maybe they haven't themselves had a bad experience, but they just saw something on the news and it's fresh in their mind. Be understanding, be empathetic. I'm not here to go back and forth with my caller and say, why would you say that? My officer is a good person. No. And truth number four is that it's not your job to convince your 911 caller that the police are good people. At the end of the day, what I can do is I can ensure my callers that, look, I'm trustworthy. My actions are going to appropriately represent my department. And I can assure you that I'm sending officers as well who want to help you. That's not false promises. I'm not going to sit here and explain the actions of another agency's, another officer in another state, another city, another county. I'm not going to go back and forth with my caller. I've had callers start that. They'll raise that and they'll start going on about, well, I heard this happen, ma'am. I can't address that. That's not my agency. I can only tell you that my officers want to help. And I want to help you. But I need to know what's going on. So be understanding and be empathetic. If your caller does express reservations or say things like, well, I just want them to help and I don't want them to make it worse. Understand that they might have really debated and really just took forever to finally dial 911. This might not have been the first situation where they needed to dial 911. They might have waited and they're like, all right, this situation is just getting worse and worse and worse. Understanding that they called me and maybe they have their reservations, all I can do is put to rest in their minds what I'm about. And I'm only about getting you help. And it's not a false promise I'm making when I say I'm telling you the officers I'm sending out there want to get you help too. So as members of public safety, yes, there's that side of you. You want to just argue it down and say, my officers are the best officers, and I've got so many friends in public safety, and they're great. But understand that not everyone's situation has been a positive one. You can do your part to ensure that your caller has a positive situation, though. A positive 911 call with you and a positive situation. And also realize that your actions on the phone will impact their perception of the officers. Because the last thing I want to do is leave a bitter taste because of a 911 call. And now my officers get on scene because I was rude or I wasn't listening to my caller. I didn't have patience or show kindness with them. That paints a picture on them. It goes back and forth. It works the other way too. People's perception of us, 911, because of a bad experience they might have had with an officer. But it definitely works that way as well on our side. We are the first responder. So let's leave the best first impression that we can in talking to our callers. Number 8, I could be your relative, your friend, your neighbor. Would you talk to them like you're talking to me now? 3 golden rules. I call it the golden rules of 911. Real simple stuff here. First rule, treat your 911 caller with the same decency and respect that you would give to a member of your family or to a friend. Number 2, imagine if the caller was your loved one. I tell you, every time I take a 911 call, that's the mindset that I'm in. I think about my mom. If my mom dialed 911, who would I want her to get on the phone? Would I want her to get somebody who's not, 100% active listening? Would I want her to get somebody who does this? They're in the middle of a conversation with their pod partner. They're heavily engaged. They're talking about what they did last night. Yeah, let me tell you what I did last night. Let me tell you, right? 911 rings. They answer the phone. And now they're on the phone and they're talking to my mom. But the whole time they're talking to my mom, in the back of their mind, they're just still trying to remember where they was at in the conversation, because they really don't want to lose that train of thought. And they was on a good train of thought, and they was talking about what they ate dinner last night, and they want to make sure they get back to that. So they're just like asking the questions and just trying to get through, but they really want to get back, and their attention's divided because they want to get back to that conversation. Meanwhile, they're not actively listening to what my mother's saying or what's happening on that call, what's going on in the background. And because of it, my mom does not get the best help that she could get or the best outcome of it. That's not what I would want to happen. So that is the mindset that I have. I give my callers full attention. That conversation can wait. You're in the middle of a game, you hit pause, that can wait. Give your callers, for the duration of that call, give them your full attention, please. Be active listening to them. Handle every 911 call with care. the same way you would expect it of your loved one. That if it was your mother, your grandmother, your father, your brother, your sister calling in, and you would want that person that got their call to give them full undivided attention. Hear them, hear what they're actually saying. Hey, here's the thing. Maybe if you can, right, stay landline with them. I'm just, hey, this is a situation where I can tell that the situation is fluid. It could change. I'm going to stay landline with you. It's a medical call. I can tell you're not completely alert. I'm going to stay landline with you, right? And third rule, if you wouldn't say it to your grandmother, don't say it to your callers. Now, I know whenever I say that, probably when the first time I gave this presentation, I was like, well, maybe unless your like grandmother's like Betty White or something. I don't know who's like a real fun one. Of course, and Betty White, it's gone now, So and maybe you have like you're like, well, my grandma's real hip. I would say it to her, or she's got a mouth in her, whatever. But I tell you what, there's a lot of things I would never say to my grandma or my granddad. So I think that's a great third rule, kind of generally. You think of your grandparents, and they're like they're fragile hearts, and you just want to respect them, and you just want to treasure them, and you want to treasure you're like, oh no, I wouldn't say that. I don't want someone to say that. And grandma's ears hear that. So same way, treat every caller with care. Treat them like they're fragile almost. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and it just breaks them or it breaks their heart. I think that's a great rule. It's a great safe rule. Listen to your callers, actively listen to them, and treat them with kindness, right? Number 9, you don't have to know me to understand me. Empathy. Empathy. The average 911 caller we get is a stranger to us. Never met them, may never ever meet them. I might cross paths with them on the street, and I'm probably not going to be like, oh, I took a call from you. I may never know. That's the thing about this job. It's amazing because we deal with strangers every day, and yet part of what we do is establishing a connection, a rapport with our callers, just for those few moments, those few minutes. We don't have to know them. They don't know us, but we still find a way to connect with them. And that's empathy. It's not sympathy, right? Because those are two different things. Sympathy is feeling sorry for another person. I feel sorry for you. Oh, I feel sorry. Oh, that's sad. Oh, yeah. It's trying to understand someone else's feelings about the situation. But empathy is deeper. It's actually putting yourself in that situation, it's putting themselves in their frame of reference, seeing it from their point of view. We connect with our callers on an emotional level. When I talk about hearing your caller, not hearing their zip code, the mobile home park that they're calling from, or hearing whether or not they finished high school, but hearing your caller and connecting with them, building a rapport with them, that's empathy. That's empathy in action. That's what makes it so incredible how we're able to connect just for those few moments with a total stranger that we will may never ever meet. And we can connect with them long enough to understand from their point of reference what they're going through, to get to the level where they're at and to help them. It's amazing. And it really is connecting on an emotional level. Not every line of work, not every profession calls for that, but ours does. And we do it so well that we don't even realize it at times. Why we deal with things like compassion fatigue, right? There's the big one of PTSD. And that's something we deal with 911, but it's not even that far. We deal with compassion fatigue a lot. We deal with things like secondary traumatic, you know, stress because hearing hours and hours, 12 hours, shifts, 8 hours, whatever, 10 hours, hearing people in the worst moments of their lives and connecting with them on that emotional level, it takes a toll on us. But understand that your caller, again, expectation wise, they dial 911, they don't know who they're getting. All they hope, think, expect, believe is that they're getting someone who will care enough to listen to them and to help them in their lowest moments. This brings me to number 10. Our last lesson here that your caller wishes you would bear in mind is that your voice could be the first kind voice I've heard in a while. I've gotten callers, and at the beginning of the call, they just sounded like just no hope, like they didn't know who or where to turn to. We really were the last resort. And I tell you, it's something incredible when you know you've really helped someone, you've really impacted a life at the end of it. It's not always in the big ways. Yeah, sometimes it's the big calls, it's the CPR saves, right? It's the choking baby calls and you giving instructions on, okay, this is how we're going to help this baby. Sometimes it is the big ones, but sometimes it's just the small calls of someone calling in who just didn't know what to do. And it could have been as simple as you telling them, hey, well, this particular situation you've got going on, I can't send an officer out there, but tell you what, this sounds like a call for code enforcement. You have their number, and they're like, well, I didn't even think of that. Kindness, as I said in the beginning of this session, patience and kindness goes a long way. Kindness, it's got to be at the forefront of everything that we do. Treat every caller like it's literally your job to help them have a better day. It can't get much simpler than that, but it's so true. Maybe they just want to vent. Maybe they just need a reason to smile or something. Maybe they just need to get something off their chest and they just need somebody to actually care enough, long enough to listen and to hear them from the beginning to the end of their call. Remember, it's not only what you say, it's how you say it, right? They can hear anger, they can hear frustration, they can certainly hear kindness, they can hear compassion, they can hear care, they can hear empathy. Your caller, they take emotional cues from us. They do this all the time with us. They match our energy. That's why we never match theirs. They can be all the way up here, and we can come down here, and we can have the capacity to bring them down to our level with a few words, a little kindness. Proverbs 16:24, one of my favorite scriptures. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul. When you bear in mind for every 911 caller, with every call, that your words literally can mean the difference between an agreeable caller or a difficult one, between chaos and calm, how you can really affect the situation with kindness, oh man, that should make you smile. You should be able to walk away and say, hey, that person was at the end of their rope. And I did a little something to bring them back from the brink. So why? Why care? Why at the end of this? Why do I care about what my caller thinks or what they have in mind when they call 911? So what? This is why. This is the what. You could have been anything you wanted to be when you grew up, and you probably didn't grow up thinking you wanted to be a 911 telecommunicator. But that's what you do. Congratulations. You chose to be amazing. So this is why it's important to me. Because this is an amazing work, and it takes amazing people to do this job. And I tell you what, I know that I never, ever, in all my years in 911, wanted to be that person that makes someone think that 911 is less amazing than what it is. So, because it's amazing work, let's all do our part to keep this field amazing. Be compassionate, be kind, be empathetic. Realize your 911 caller might be calling for the very first time. They don't know what to ask, what to say, what to do. Guide them, lead them, help them. You're the skilled professional. You're the trained professional, not them. Bear all of that in mind. Keep being amazing and keep doing what you do. And I'll keep doing what I do, which is helping to teach and train and hype up this field and hype y'all up for as long as I can. That's me. You find me on LinkedIn. That's the QR code. Hey, connect with me anytime. Thank you so much, Missouriaco. Zach, thank you.
You know, it would help if I hit the right button. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in with this great information. You know, I when I sat through this back when you did it for Dare to Be Great, it came at a right time for me, just kind of as a refresher and kind of a perspective shift where we get into a routine where we're answering calls, we get into a routine where we have to get the critical information as quick as possible and get that flipped around to our officers.
Yeah.
So when you listen to this perspective shift and you come to realize that, well, crap, uh, I've been going about this a little bit differently than what I need to. So, um, so
All
thank
of
you
us.
for bringing that perspective shift in, because sometimes we need a kind kick in the rear to be like, hey, you got to help. You got to help your callers out. You got to make them realize that we are the trained professionals. So, are there any questions for Sam before we kick off? Because it is 5 o'clock her time. I'm sure she wants to get out and get some food. I'll give it just a second before we'll kick off. But while we're doing that, the little green button below us did go ahead and flip over to the sign in and get credit for this training. So make sure that you did go ahead and sign in. For those of you who are joining us from out of the United States, aka Canada, we did go ahead and get you all the provinces up in Canada set in as well, because that was a request, and we're seeing quite a few of you from out of country now, which is freaking amazing. I'm not seeing any questions, so we're going to go ahead and end this. If you do have any questions, like she said, her QR code for LinkedIn's right there, and she's really freaking good about answering promptly, because that's how we got this set up. We're going to go ahead and head out.
All
I
right.
will see you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.